Hey everybody, Aaron Zamzo here with the FRF Podcast. Today we're going to talk about stress, its relation to cortisol, and how you as a first responder need to manage it.
It's time to get fit for duty with the FRF Podcast. Here's your host, Aaron Zamzo.
Hey everybody, Aaron Zamzo, Fire Rescue Fitness Podcast. Let's talk about stress, everybody. I just had a great article written by Rhonda Cohen on the FRF blog, and you can see that there will be a link underneath this podcast that talks about cortisol. And as I was reading what she was writing, and the reason why Rhonda wrote it is she has her master's degree, I believe, in nutrition. She's a certified nutritionist. She's been in the industry as a first responder for over 30 years and also in health and wellness. And as we were talking about ideas for her to get more involved with the team here at FRF, we were talking about cortisol. And I really think it's a topic and a subject that, one, we don't like to admit that we actually suffer from, meaning stress as a first responder. And I think the second part is that we don't really know how to identify it. After a while, we believe, in our mind's eye that we aren't affected by the calls or the stress of the calls because, the tones go off and, this tone's going off again, whether you're in the shower or trying to go to the bathroom or what it might be or wherever you might be. It's like, gosh, what is this time? And every day is a little bit different, of course, and every situation is a little bit different. But from my whole point of view and what I see and what talking with first responders all over the country, we see it one way, and our body actually sees it another way. And what I'm talking about here, and I'll give you an example, is done some work with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and I've actually done this on myself and looked at, when the tones go off, and especially at night, if you're laying in your bunk and you're trying to sleep or you are asleep and the tones go off, I automatically feel, hey, my heart kind of skips a beat and that heart rate elevates. And what we found in research with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee is that this is true. The more stressful the call, the longer that heart rate and the longer your body it takes to get back down to like homeostasis, into balance. So your heart rate stays elevated a little bit more, along with some other stress responses that we may not on the outside feel like, hey, I'm just going back to bed. Or, we've had, I'm sure this has happened to you. You've had gruesome calls or calls where there's a lot of, things like puke or vomit or, what else. And then you go back and you wash up, clean up, and then you go back to eating or wherever you are in the kitchen, right? Like it's a different environment that we live in and talk about sometimes. But I also feel that your body still responds to stress the way it's going to respond. And physiologically, what happens is there is a fight or flight response to the body. And cortisol is part of that. And what happens is, let's say, for instance, the tones go off. Physically, your body, your heart rate goes up a little bit. You might start to sweat a little bit. Different hormones start to take place to kind of ready the body if it needs more energy. And all of these things kind of go behind the scene, behind the curtain, as I like to say. On the front side, we might feel and look and try to perceive ourselves as very, very in control and unstressed and unscathed. This is just what we do. Physiologically, the body is doing something else. Now, over the course of a career, let's say, or even a course of a couple of years, let's say, what happens is that this cortisol is produced when we have this stress response, and a little bit of it is actually healthy for the body. What happens, though, is over the course of our careers and repeated exposure to trauma, repeated stresses, inflammation within our diet, inflammation within just what, like I said, diet, but not getting enough exercise and not managing stress and alcohol and caffeine, all these things can accumulate. So cortisol levels start to get way out of whack. And when that happens, physiologically, some things happen to our bodies. We start to store more body fat, especially like for men around the waist. We start to get a foggy brain a little bit. We don't sleep very well. We become more agitated. And that's what happens when our cortisol levels get out of whack, per se, or we get to a point where we can't necessarily manage them. And let me back up a little bit. So cortisone it's a steroid. It's made naturally in the body. It's secreted by adrenal glands that are located right on top of the kidneys. And so when we get this stress, or what the body perceives as a threat or a stressor, it reacts to allow us to handle the situation, the flight or the fight. Blood pressure goes up. We start to metabolize glucose in case we need that energy. Our mental acuity starts to come up a little bit. And it tries to, this flight or fight gets us energy for all of different processes. So cortisol is released during that. The body then responds by, obviously doing what it needs to do, increasing heart rate, increasing blood pressure, getting more critical energy to the brain and to the large muscle groups. And that's okay. That's an all right response to it. But what happens then is, as it continually, as we're continually exposed to these traumas, to these stresses, the cortisol levels get higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And, the research that is out there is really, really showing this. So if you want to dig even further into it, I could give a 3-hour lecture. I'd have to do a little bit more research on it. But the more I dug, the more I wanted to learn about it. So I just thought, this is why I'm doing this podcast. So really what happens when you start to get this excessive amount of cortisol is it leads to high blood sugars, anxiety, depressions, constipation, bloating. It starts to decrease your good gut bacteria, which then leads to those things: diabetes, headaches, heart disease, high blood pressure, the memory and the fogginess, a weight gain. It can even lead to some cancers. Again, this small amount is okay. But as it starts to get out of whack and we don't control it, it really leads to all of these issues. And when you think about it, right, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, those are the things, those health issues that are really plaguing us in the fire service. So I believe when you start to look at managing cortisol, you really start to manage a lot of the health issues seen within our first responders, our firefighters, EMTs, and medics. And I think a lot of this has to do with, we're constantly under that stress of the calls. Now, if you're on call paid or volunteer, I think it's even twofold, because you got the stress of your everyday life, and then you throw on top trying to get to those calls. Not saying that we don't have that with career, but sometimes career, you're there and it's a little bit easier to focus. Now, the career may have more restless nights because of the call volume at nights. So anyways, regardless, it doesn't matter whether you're on call paid, volunteer, or career. We're all exposed to these stressors. And once that cortisol gets out of whack, it can lead to a lot of these things. And it can also lead to cravings. Personally, I went through a time, through the COVID period where I was eating and I was just tremendously hungry and craving hunger. And I was also doing a lot of caffeine and doing some energy drinks and starting to get, I felt like, my cortisol levels out of whack. And once I started to get, alleviate and control the caffeine a little bit, get my rest, and I started to add a little bit of, stress management techniques, started to do a gratitude journal. I started to do just 3 minutes of deep, heavy breathing, and it really helped. And the main way to manage cortisol is just do what I just said. You got to find ways to bring that cortisol level down, manage your stress. Here's a good idea. Couple tips. One is try to get good quality sleep. First thing I hear you say is, oh yeah, it's really easy to say that. But what happens? We got calls and we got all these things. At this firehouse, I know sometimes it's hard, but when you're at home, try to set up a good sleeping habit. Decrease and don't have caffeine up to 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. Sleep in a quiet, dark room. Turn off the lights. Throw the laptop down and get your phone away from you for 20 or 30 minutes before you go to sleep. Try to get a good pattern. At the firehouse, take a nap. Take a power nap. Halfway through the day, I believe it should be part of our process, especially if you're at a really, really busy firehouse. So really focus on trying to get better quality sleep. Another way, and I'm going to talk about this, is exercise regularly. Regular exercise at moderate paces, on minimum 3 times a week, 5 times a week, or 6 times a week max. Because here's another thing: if you start to exercise excessively, high intensity, you add no rest and poor nutrition, or not so good nutrition, and then you actually add cortisol levels and you add to that stress. But you need to really think about your fitness and exercise program as a whole. How is it playing with my shifts? Did I not get a lot of sleep? Then I should be doing something like maybe a little less intense, some stretching, maybe some yoga, a little less intense cardio to help me recover. And all that comes into play when you look at exercise. Now, exercise really helps combat those excessive stress levels of cortisol when done properly and when part of a program. So first, you look at ways to rest. Second, you look at staying consistent with your fitness. And then the other thing is to really recognize stressors. It's okay to, next time you have a call, to take a step back and go, oh, yeah, my heart rate is getting up there a little bit. Take a couple of deep breaths. Sometimes I see this a lot. People start to get up here, just take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, get in good posture. There's a great breathing technique that I've read about it, and Rhonda talks a little bit about, just take a quick and easy 4 seconds in, pause, and then try to breathe out for 6 seconds. And this breathing technique has been known to increase or decrease your heart rate and increase your kind of mental awareness and control your stress. So even some nice breathing techniques are a great way to start to manage that stressor. They call that box breathing. I'm sorry. Repeat that a couple of times. This also goes into yoga, massage, meditation. I know you're like, oh, this stuff is so foo-foo, Zam. What the hell? But it's foo-foo, and it works. And you don't have to go in the corner and go om and start doing this whole little ritual. But just going in, taking a little bit of time. Maybe it's in your bunk, or maybe it's, I've seen people do this in the truck. Just sit there with nobody else around. Take a couple of deep breaths. Shrug your shoulders a little bit. Do some stretching, do a couple of yoga poses, and maybe just even take a lap around the station outside. Just get outside for a couple of minutes, just to try to bring, your body back to homeostasis, back to balance. And that's really what it comes down to. Cortisol is our stress response. The body goes through and says, okay, what do I need to do to, either fight or flight to bring us back to balance? And some great ways to do that, again, are sleep, exercise, recognize some of these stressors, try to, do some things like, well, you're talking about box breathing and yoga and meditation. We also talk about laughter in this article, how laughter releases endorphins, suppresses cortisol. And I think we already know that, because a lot of times we laugh a lot in the firehouse, which is great. But try to bring laughter more into your life. Make sure that you feel gratitude sometimes. If you're going down this negative kind of hole, as I like to say it, and this happens a lot when you're in groups and you start talking about the chief didn't do this and so didn't do that, and we don't have this. Sometimes it's nice just to step away and say, okay, look, I still got my health. I'm still able to respond. I'm still able to help members of my community. I'm a member of this fire department, and that's all good stuff. And that simple little thing can flip a switch to help your body deal with the cortisol and the stress. So practice some gratitude, practice some breathing, some stretching, some yoga, consistent exercise. And then the last little point I'm going to talk about is nutrition. Cortisol levels can be elevated because of stress. Well, that's not just like Billy's got to get to school on time, I have a call. Stress can be I sprained my ankle. Stress can be I got some trauma from some mental issues going on, or that I have from trauma, some PTSD. But it also can be cortisol can be raised and heightened because of poor nutrition. When you start to decrease the good bacteria within your belly, you get the diarrhea, the gas, and all that. But you also don't, you don't get all the nutrition out of your food, and that can actually add to the high cortisol levels. I believe that, that some of these energy drinks can do that as well, because they they kind of get your adrenaline going, and they get your adrenaline system out of whack because of that high caffeine, and that can affect your stress and increase your cortisol levels, which then can actually lead to a decrease in blood sugar regulation, and that leads to an increase in body fat accumulation. And so all these things can come into play, right? When you start to think about, man, it's really hard for me to lose weight because I have all these cravings and I have no energy. So I've been reaching for these energy drinks all the time and caffeine, and I just feel beat up, and my stress levels is really, really high. And maybe what you need instead of caffeine is just to take a couple of deep breaths and find some ways to alleviate that stress positively. I've told you about personally, like there's times where I feel like I am really, really tired if I've traveled a lot or, doing just a lot of stuff, whether it be at home, at work, and then all of a sudden I start reaching for these energy drinks. And after about a week, I just start to feel depleted and beat down, and the energy drinks don't do it anymore for me. And I've had numerous bouts of this. And what happens, it takes a couple days to just, I do an intermittent fast. I drink a lot of water. I'll do teas. I still will do some coffees, but not at the level of which that caffeine of those energy drinks. And lo and behold, I start to feel better and get my energy levels back within a couple days. I also really focus on getting good quality fruits and vegetables, some whole grains, and good protein sources within that time frame, and any time, I should say, not just within that time frame. But eating good nutrition can help lower that cortisol level. Eating bad nutrition can go to the opposite side of that and add to your stress levels. And so the reason why I think this is so important for us as first responders, because I talk about the importance of exercise. We talk about the importance of nutrition. We talk about the importance of stress management. Well, this kind of throws it in all of our faces a little bit and says, this is why. So the stress, the lack of nutrition, the lack of exercise keeps ramping up this cortisol level, which adds to, the higher blood pressure, which can add to, insulin insensitivity, which can lead to body fat accumulation, which can lead to a cloudy mind, which can lead to low testosterone, which can lead to all these different issues down the way. So the takeaways, right? All right, Zam, you got me. I feel just like you were talking about. I'm doing a lot of energy drinks. I'm not working out consistently. What do I do? Well, first things first. Let's just talk about step one. Find ways to manage the stress. I started drinking more water. I also started to do an 16-hour fast on days that I wasn't at the firehouse. I would actually come off the firehouse. So like I have a shift tomorrow. I'll eat normal in the morning. At 8 o'clock at night, I'm done eating. I'll stop until noon the next day. And then when I'm at home, I'll eat regular for the next day. And then when I go to the firehouse, I'll stop at 8. Does two things. Gets me out of the kitchen, helps me control my cravings. And now if we have a call where I need to, rehydrate and need to fuel back up, I will. But fasting helps, just with me, drinking a lot of water, caffeine, get from like green teas and black coffee. And, just slowly but surely start to eat really, really healthy. Good fruits, good vegetables, good sources of lean protein. Exercise consistently, not every single day. What I want you to start with is, 3 times a week, 30 minutes or so. And then as things start to get better and better, you get more energy, that turns into 4 days a week. And those workouts can be just strict cardio. It could be stretching. It could be yoga. It could be a combination. I would recommend a combination and some circuit training in there. And then slowly but surely monitor what's stressing you out. Take a couple deep breaths. Do a 3-minute meditation. We have on our FRF YouTube page, there's a great meditation that I linked to. There's a couple of great ones from Deepak Chopra. It's just 3 minutes, just focuses on breathing and just kind of getting you away from everything. And I think that's the key to this. It is a process. It's going to take time. And you have to build these into habits. It's going to be successful if you make it part of your every single day. And with that, I am going to encourage you to reach out. If you have questions, I can get you in touch with Rhonda. I can get you in touch with me. Go to the FRF firerescuefitness.com website. You can email me. You can hit me on any social media. It's just me and my dog Tessa that answer all this stuff. So if you have questions, let me know. If you think I'm on something or onto something, let me know. Please forward this on to your crew. Thanks for listening. Please, let me know what I can do to help you and your crew get more fit for duty.